What happens when the entity that constantly reminds you of your mortality decides to hang up her bags and go on vacation? This is the story of death from the TV series The Sandman. Warning, spoilers ahead. The episode begins with a man in an apartment. He sits and writes a suicide letter to his ex, Sylvie. His name is Sexton, and in his email, he complains about the sickening state of the world, how humans destroy their environment and how no one does anything about it. As he sits there thinking of what to say next, his roommate, Billy, comes in with her girlfriend, Amelia. They greet each other before Billy signals Sexton to give them the room, hinting that she wants to get intimate with her girlfriend. Amelia gets into an argument with Billy, saying all they ever do is sleep together. Sexton sneaks out as they argue and heads outside. There, he decides to send a voicemail to his ex instead. As he does, he finds a trail of books on the ground, which leads him to a dumpster. He climbs to the top, looks out over the city, and pulls out some pills. He plans to overdose. He's clearly at his lowest point in life. Sexton hesitates, and as he tries to make a move, he slips and falls. He lies there moaning in pain until a female voice is heard. A woman asks if anyone is there, and Sexton says yes. She climbs up, moves a fridge to help, and Sexton manages to free himself. Afterward, the woman notices that Sexton is bleeding and offers to take him to her place to stitch him up. At her house, she also sews his jacket. After bandaging his wounds, Sexton thanks her and starts asking questions, trying to figure out who she is. She says she's into rescuing journalists from illegal fly-tipping sites. Sexton is surprised she knows about him and asks if she's read his column. She says she does, only on her days off. Sexton asks, days off from what? The woman replies that he wouldn't believe her. Then she tells him, she's death. Sexton, of course, thinks it's a joke but decides to play along. He asks, Death has a day off, and she says yes, once every 100 years. But she assures him that she won't be taking any lives on her day off. Sexton thinks this woman must be crazy and decides to leave. They say their goodbyes, and Death mentions she'll be seeing him again, saying she sees everyone eventually. As Sexton steps outside, he trips over a wire and falls. He checks the wire and wonders who would put it there. Lost in thought, he doesn't notice an old woman sneaking up behind him. She breaks a bottle and points it at Sexton, demanding that he take her to the apartment to meet Death. She threatens to rough him up if he tries anything. Sexton agrees and knocks on Death's door. She opens it and finds the old woman, Hattie, holding Sexton at bottle point. Death lets them in, and Hattie releases Sexton. Death asks what Hattie wants. Hattie says she's looking for her soul. She hid it from Death over 300 years ago and can't remember where she put it. Sexton sits and watches as the two talk about life, death, dragons, and souls. Eventually, Death agrees to help Hattie and tells her to make herself at home. She then leaves with Sexton. On the way out, Sexton asks why Death isn't calling the police. There's a madwoman in her apartment. Death brushes it off, saying Hattie just needs help. Death says she has a lot to do on her day off, and flags down a taxi. Sexton says he's going home, but Death asks him to come along. She mentions that Billy is currently having sex, and instead of disturbing her, Sexton could show Death around. Death then turns to the taxi driver and asks her to take them anywhere she considers the best place in the city. As they drive, Death asks what the driver thinks makes life worth living. The driver says her sister Maggie thinks it's men, but for her, it's the feeling of finishing a shift and coming home to a relaxing day off. They eventually arrive at a club. When Death offers to pay, the driver says it's on the house. Death thanks her and walks toward the crowd. Sexton turns to the driver, saying that in London, taxi drivers never give free rides. The driver replies that she just liked the girl. Unbeknownst to her, she just gave Death a free ride. She tells Sexton that if he's so bothered, he can pay, so he does. Sexton walks over to Death and asks if she always gets free stuff from people, noting that she's already gotten free food from 2 vendors today. Death replies that nothing is truly free, including herself. As they talk, Billy arrives. Sexton introduces Death as Dee Dee. He asks Billy what she's doing at the club, saying he thought she'd be with Amelia. Billy says they had a fight and decided to come to the club instead. She invites them in, saying she knows the bouncer and he'll let them in for free. Inside, Dee Dee meets Billy's friends, including a girl named Jackie. Dee Dee, in her usual friendly way, compliments them. Sexton, however, is still uptight. He's worried he might run into Sylvie, and the club isn't really his scene. Jackie takes an interest in Sexton, especially after learning that he's into vintage and toy collecting. She smiles at the mention of toys, but Sexton clarifies that it's not that kind of toy.
That's a shame.
Dee Dee and Billy decide to get drinks. At the counter, Death looks over at Sexton and says he looks miserable. Billy agrees, saying he is miserable. Not only did he break up with his girlfriend, but he also believes the world is ending and no one cares. Dee Dee says Billy doesn't think like that, and Billy confesses she used to. But after meeting Amelia, things got better. Billy admits Amelia is just one person, but that's all the hope she needs, though Amelia thinks she's a sex addict. Meanwhile, Sexton talks to Amelia and mentions he heard she and Billy had a fight. Amelia says Billy only wants sex. Sexton disagrees, saying he's known Billy since university and she never wanted to sleep with anyone until Amelia came along. Amelia takes it as a compliment and quickly reconciles with Billy. A man gives Dee Dee her drink and says it's on the house. He's Theo, the club manager. He sees the pendant on Dee Dee's neck, recognizes it, but keeps his cool. When Sexton goes to grab his drink, Theo asks how long he's known Dee Dee. Sexton says he just met her a few hours ago. Later, Theo chats with Dee Dee. He keeps glancing at her pendant, eventually commenting that it's a symbol of death. Dee Dee says it's more a symbol of immortality. Theo invites her to dance, but Dee Dee declines, saying she came with Sexton. Theo says Sexton doesn't like to dance, at least, that's what Sylvie told him. Eventually, Dee Dee is convinced and agrees to dance with Theo. Billy asks Sexton why he's so uptight. She mentions that Dee Dee seems to like him, but Sexton replies that Dee Dee likes everyone. He tells Billy that Dee Dee calls herself Death, and she's not shy about it. While Death enjoys herself on the dance floor, Sexton stands by the doorway, lost in thought. Jackie joins him, and they talk. Sexton shares how he feels like the world is ending and no one cares. He says it feels like he's the only one who does, and it's dragging him down. Jackie offers a different perspective. She talks about a friend who was abused by her father and her friends. One day, while they were fishing, the girl ran into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and cut herself. She passed out and woke up in the hospital. Jackie says the girl's father was afraid she'd talk. The point is, the girl didn't give up. She chose to live. Sexton realizes that the girl in the story was Jackie. They're interrupted by Dee Dee, who says Theo wants to give them a tour of the club. It used to be a storage unit. Sexton doesn't trust Theo, but Dee Dee is enjoying the experience. Eventually, Theo shows up and invites them for the tour. They go into a storage room. Suddenly, Theo yanks off Death's pendant. He says it's her sigil, and now the power of life and death is in his hands. Death tries to warn him that it doesn't work that way, but he doesn't listen. Instead, he locks them inside. Death notices something behind the storage room. She walks over and sees symbols on the floor and a book with her sigil drawn on one of the pages. She explains to Sexton that she was summoned there by Theo. Death apologizes to Sexton for dragging him into her troubles. She says all she wanted was a good day off, but instead, she got cocky, and now it's a mess. Sexton tells her that no one has gotten hurt yet, but Death responds that Hattie is counting on her to retrieve her soul. She reveals she only has a few hours left before her one day off in 100 years is over. Sexton finds a baseball bat and says that while it might not open the door, it could open Theo's skull. Death tells him to put it down, pointing out that he might seriously hurt Theo. Sexton asks if she's truly Death, and she says she is, but that doesn't mean she goes around killing people. She says people have free will and can make choices. Sexton argues that not everyone has a choice. He mentions disasters like famine, disease, hunger, and floods. Death replies that she's not saying life isn't painful, but that it's not always painful. Sexton agrees, adding that we live our lives and sometimes forget there are people struggling to survive, families dying of starvation or sickness. He expresses his frustration, saying that no matter how many times he writes about it, nothing changes. That leads him to wonder, why bother? Which eventually becomes, what's the point? Death consoles him, saying that even humans sometimes forget the gift of free will. Sexton asks if she doesn't have free will. She explains that she and her family have duties and only get to be free once every 100 years. As they talk, Sexton gets an idea. He picks out a marble box and places the marbles on the floor. He plans to make Theo slip and fall so he and Death can escape. Death is happy to see Sexton fighting for his life, saying she knows he wanted to end it all earlier that day. Theo walks in on them with a gun in hand. He tells Death that her pendant didn't work. Death replies, I told you so. Theo demands that Death bring back Natalie, his girlfriend. But Death says she can't. Once someone is gone, there's no coming back. She tries to tell Theo that Natalie's death wasn't his fault, she simply overdosed. But Theo insists the police won't see it that way. He says he's not ready to go to prison and points the gun at his own head, asking Death to send him to Natalie. Death and Sexton try to stop him, and Theo slips on the marbles and falls, hitting his head on the floor. He lies there bleeding and asks Death if she's going to take him. Death says, maybe another time. I'm on my day off. Eventually, an ambulance arrives and takes Theo away. Sexton tells Death that the paramedics said Theo has a minor concussion and will be fine the next day. He suggests they go visit him, but Death says she won't be around. Her time is almost up. They take one final walk and stop at a vendor. Death sees her pendant and asks how much it is. The vendor prepares to offer it for free, but Sexton cuts in, causing the man to charge £30. Instead, Death chooses a different necklace and pays for it. They arrive at a quiet spot, and Death thanks Sexton for spending the day with her. She says she enjoyed every moment, even being held at gunpoint. She gives Sexton 2 pennies and the necklace, saying it's for Hattie. They stand and watch the city, with Death wishing she could have just one more minute to take it all in again. The clock runs out, and Death falls into the pool. Sexton pulls her out and cries for her. Hattie arrives and tells him it's too late. She's gone, and won't be back for another 100 years. Hattie takes the 2 pennies and places them over Death's eyes as passage into the underworld. Sexton gives her the necklace. Hattie shows him her soul, it's a picture of her daughter from long ago. She thanks Sexton and walks away. The scene shifts to Sexton telling Billy about everything that happened. Billy asks, what if Dee Dee really was Death? Sexton replies, wouldn't it be nice if Death was someone, and not just pain and emptiness? Someone friendly, who genuinely likes people, and is kind and funny. The doorbell rings, and while Billy goes to answer it, Sexton opens his laptop and prepares to delete the suicide letter from earlier. Jackie enters and says she was worried after Billy told her Sexton hadn't come home last night, so she came to check on him. As they talk, Billy and Amelia head out to give them the room. Sexton asks Jackie if she wants tea, and she says yes. He deletes the message, showing that he has chosen to live. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to live your life with purpose. Appreciate everything, and remember, we have the free will to choose how we want to live. In the end, death is simply the cost of living. Have a good day, and see you in the next one.